The fluorescent lights in the conference room made everything look sickly and pale, but that wasn't why Sarah Martinez's hands were shaking. She stood at the front of the room, laser pointer trembling slightly as she pointed to a diagram of the tower crane's hydraulic system on the screen behind her. I sat in the back row, arms crossed, watching her stumble through her presentation with the kind of satisfaction that makes you feel powerful and small at the same time. "So, as you can see," she said, her voice catching slightly, "the pressure differential in the main cylinder suggests that the seal integrity has been compromised, which would explain the intermittent failures we've been experiencing over the past 3 weeks. I leaned back in my chair, letting it creak loud enough for everyone to hear. 12 pairs of eyes turned toward me. Sarah's words died in her throat. "That's interesting," I said, my voice carrying that particular tone I'd perfected over 17 years at Bridgeport Industrial. The one that sounds like you're asking a question, but everyone knows you're really saying someone's an idiot. "Real interesting. So you're telling us that a 40-year-old crane operator with, 6 weeks on the job? You're telling us that you know more about our equipment than the maintenance team that's been working on it for 2 decades? The room went quiet. Not the productive kind of quiet where people are thinking. The uncomfortable kind where everyone's suddenly very interested in their coffee cups and notepads. Sarah's face flushed red, starting at her neck and climbing upward like someone had turned on a faucet. She was 28, maybe 30, short dark hair, work boots that still had that new leather stiffness, and a Carhartt jacket that didn't have the wear patterns of someone who'd spent real time in the field. She'd been hired on as part of some diversity initiative. At least, that's what I told myself. That's what made it easier. "I'm not saying that," she said quietly. "I'm just presenting what the data shows." "The data," I repeated, making air quotes with my fingers. A few of the guys chuckled. Tommy Brennan, who'd worked under me for 8 years, smirked into his styrofoam cup. "See, here's what I know about data. Data doesn't replace experience. Data doesn't replace knowing how things actually work in the real world, not just on paper." I stood up, and somehow that made the room feel smaller. I'm not a big man, 5'10", maybe 170 after a heavy meal, but I'd learned how to fill a space when I needed to. "We've already called Munson Hydraulics. They're sending a team out next week, real professionals, people who actually know what they're doing." Sarah's jaw tightened. For a moment I thought she might push back, might defend herself. Part of me almost wanted her to. Instead, she just nodded once, clicked off the projector and gathered her notes with hands that had stopped shaking and started doing something else, something harder, more controlled. "Meeting's over," I said. "Everyone back to work. We've got a site to run, and we're already 3 days behind schedule because of this crane situation." The room emptied quickly. Construction people are good at reading rooms, at knowing when to disappear. Sarah was the last one out, and she didn't look at me as she passed, didn't look at anyone. I should have felt good. I should have felt like I'd protected my team, maintained standards, kept some college kid with a fancy degree from wasting everyone's time. Instead, I felt like I'd just kicked a dog that was already limping. But I pushed that feeling down deep, where I'd learned to push lots of feelings over the years. The Bridgeport industrial site sat on 73 acres of what used to be wetland before the Army Corps of Engineers decided progress mattered more than migrating birds. We fabricated steel components for bridges, buildings, anything that needed serious structural support. The tower crane, the one that was currently dead in the water, costing us roughly $14,000 a day in delays, was our primary lift system. When it worked, which lately was never. I'd started at Bridgeport when I was 19, sweeping floors and learning to read blueprints by squinting at them during lunch breaks. Worked my way up to foreman, then site supervisor, then operations manager. Every promotion earned, every skill learned the hard way. My dad had worked construction until a piece of rebar crushed 3 vertebrae when I was 12. He taught me that in this business, you respect people who can do the work, and you don't trust people who only talk about it. Sarah Martinez was a talker. Had to be. She'd shown up with a degree in mechanical engineering from Georgia Tech, some kind of internship experience at a place that built mining equipment, and exactly 0 days working on an actual construction site. HR had hired her over Bobby Chen, who'd been doing hydraulic maintenance at a shipyard for 15 years. When I'd complained, Regional had sent me a very polite email about evolving workforce demographics and competitive positioning for future contracts. Translation: the government wanted to see diversity in contractor teams, and we needed government contracts. So I got Sarah. The afternoon after the meeting, I found her in the equipment yard, standing next to the dead crane with a clipboard and what looked like a voltmeter. The crane loomed above her like a steel dinosaur, its boom extending 200 feet into the grey October sky. The wind coming off Lake Michigan was cold enough to sting, carrying the smell of dead fish and diesel fuel. "What are you doing?" I asked. She didn't startle, didn't even turn around, just kept checking something on the control panel mounted to the crane's base. "Running diagnostics," she said. "Munson's coming next week." "I know. So this is a waste of time." Now she did turn, and her face was completely neutral. No anger, no hurt, no nothing. Somehow that was worse than if she'd yelled at me. "Probably," she said. "But I have time to waste, apparently, since my other responsibilities have been redistributed." That hit harder than it should have. After the meeting, I'd quietly reassigned her project coordination duties to Danny Reeves. Told myself it was about efficiency, about putting people where they could actually contribute. Told myself a lot of things. "Look," I said, and I was aiming for reasonable but probably landing closer to condescending. "I get that you want to prove yourself. That's natural. But there's a way things work here, and—" "The hydraulic system is fine," she interrupted. I blinked. "What?" "The hydraulic system is fine. The seals are fine. The pressure differentials I was showing in that meeting, those are symptoms, not causes." I should have made that clearer, but I didn't get the chance to finish. She flipped through papers on her clipboard, pulled out a printout covered in numbers and graphs. "I've been logging the failure events. Every single malfunction happens between 2 and 4 in the afternoon. Every single one. The temperature correlation is nearly perfect. And yesterday, I checked the transformer feeding power to the crane's electrical system. It's rated for 90 kilovolt amperes, but the actual draw during operation peaks at 94. I stared at her. The electrical system was inspected in June. Inspected, yes, but not load-tested under full operational conditions. And definitely not checked against the recent addition of the secondary hoist motor that was installed in August. She pointed up at the crane's machinery deck. That motor pulls an additional 15 amps. On paper, it should be fine. But these old transformers degrade. The insulation breaks down. When the ambient temperature rises in the afternoon and the transformer heats up, its efficiency drops just enough that the voltage to the control system becomes unstable. The hydraulic pumps are electric. When they get inconsistent voltage, they create inconsistent pressure. Hence, the symptoms I was presenting. I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. "You're guessing," I finally said. "I'm hypothesizing based on evidence," she corrected. "There's a difference. And I can prove it. Give me 2 hours with the crane during peak temperature tomorrow. If I'm wrong, I'll apologize in front of the whole team. If I'm right." She paused, and something flickered in her eyes. Not triumph, just tired determination. "If I'm right, you save $14,000 a day and don't have to wait for Munson." The smart thing would have been to tell her no, the safe thing. The thing that protected me from looking like an idiot if she was wrong, or worse, looking like an idiot if she was right. Fine, I heard myself say. Tomorrow, 2 hours. But if you break something, I won't break anything, she said quietly. That's literally my job, the one you hired me to do. She turned back to the crane, and I stood there like an idiot for another 10 seconds before walking away. That night, I sat in my apartment, a one-bedroom in a complex where every unit looked exactly the same, and drank 3 beers while watching baseball highlights I didn't care about. My ex-wife Jennifer had called that morning. Our daughter Emma was doing well at Ohio State, needed money for textbooks. I'd sent it. Same as always, trying to buy back some fraction of the years I'd spent choosing overtime over dance recitals. I thought about Sarah's face in that meeting, the way her hands had shaken, the way I'd made them shake. I thought about my father, lying in a hospital bed, telling me that the worst thing about the accident wasn't the pain. It was watching the site manager testify that he'd been violating safety protocols, watching them blame him for his own crushed spine because it was easier than admitting they'd been cutting corners on equipment maintenance. I finished the 3rd beer and told myself that tomorrow, when Sarah's theory fell apart, it would prove I'd been right all along. That experience mattered. That there was an order to things, a hierarchy, a way the world worked. I told myself that right up until I fell asleep. I got to the site at 6:30 the next morning, same as always. The sky was that particular shade of grey that meant Chicago was thinking about rain but hadn't committed yet. The parking lot was mostly empty, just the early crew trucks and one Honda Civic that definitely belonged to Sarah. She was already in the equipment yard when I arrived, setting up what looked like a testing station next to the crane. Laptop, some kind of voltage monitoring equipment, temperature sensors taped to various parts of the electrical cabinet. She'd zip-tied her dark hair back and was wearing safety glasses that kept sliding down her nose. "You're early," I said. "Want to be ready when the temperature starts climbing." She didn't look up from her laptop. Also wanted to make sure I had clear documentation of every step in case anyone questions the methodology later. The implication hung there like morning fog. In case you try to discredit this later. Smart, I admitted. She glanced at me then, surprised. It was a small crack in the professional wall she'd built, and through it I saw something young and uncertain. Then it was gone. Thanks. By 8 o'clock, half the crew knew something was happening. By 9, everyone knew. Construction sites are like small towns. News travels fast and gets embellished along the way. I heard at least 3 versions of the story, ranging from "that new girl thinks she can fix the crane" to "Martinez is about to get herself fired." Tommy Brennan wandered over around 10, coffee in hand, watching Sarah work with the kind of skepticism you usually reserve for faith healers and politicians. "This is gonna be good," he muttered to me, like watching someone try to perform surgery with a YouTube video. "She knows what she's doing," I said, and immediately regretted it because Tommy's eyebrows shot up. "You defending her now, boss? That's a hell of a turnaround from yesterday." I'm not defending anyone. I'm observing." But even I could hear how weak that sounded. Sarah had explained her plan to me earlier. She'd monitor the electrical system continuously while running the crane through standard operations. As the day warmed up and the transformer heated, she predicted we'd see voltage instability correlating directly with the hydraulic failures. Then she'd implement what she called a temporary load balancing solution, rerouting some of the electrical supply through a secondary transformer we had sitting unused in the maintenance building. It sounded plausible. It also sounded like the kind of thing that could go catastrophically wrong. By noon, the temperature had climbed to 63 degrees. Not warm by summer standards, but warm enough for late October. Sarah was running the crane through its paces, lifting, rotating, extending the boom. Everything was working perfectly, which meant either her theory was wrong or we hadn't hit the critical temperature yet. Danny Reeves had joined the growing audience, so had most of the day shift. Nothing brings construction workers together like the possibility of watching someone fail spectacularly. "Voltage is dropping," Sarah called out, eyes on her laptop screen. "We're at 222 volts, down from 230 this morning. Temperature on the transformer housing is 108 degrees. She ran the crane through another lift cycle. The boom extended smoothly, picked up a test load, 2,000 pounds of steel plate, and began to rotate. Then it stuttered. The movement wasn't quite a stop, wasn't quite a continuation. The boom lurched, jerked forward another few feet, then froze completely. The steel plate dangled in midair, swaying slightly in the wind. "There it is," Sarah said, and there was no satisfaction in her voice, just confirmation. Voltage dropped to 218. Hydraulic pressure in the main boom cylinder dropped from 3,000 psi to 2,400. Exactly what happened during the previous 17 failures. She made some notes, checked something on her monitor, then jogged over to the maintenance building. 3 minutes later, she came back carrying what looked like heavy-duty jumper cables and a metal box covered in warning labels. "What the hell is that?" Tommy asked. "Temporary transformer tap," Sarah said, already connecting cables to the secondary transformer. "It's going to split the load between the primary and secondary systems. Crude, but it should work for now." "Should?" I said. She looked at me, and for the first time since yesterday's meeting, there was something almost like humor in her eyes. "Nothing in engineering is guaranteed, Mr. Patterson. There's only probability and acceptable risk." She threw the switch. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the crane's control panel lit up with its full array of indicator lights, and the boom hummed back to life. Sarah worked the controls carefully, professionally. The boom completed its rotation, lowered the steel plate exactly where it was supposed to go, and retracted without so much as a hiccup. She ran it through 5 more cycles. Perfect operation, every time. The watching crew was dead silent. Tommy's mouth was actually hanging open. Sarah shut down the crane, disconnected her monitoring equipment with methodical precision, and gathered her notes. When she finally turned to face the crowd, her expression was carefully neutral. "The real fix will require replacing the primary transformer," she said to me, as if the 20 other people standing around didn't exist. "I checked our inventory. We have a suitable replacement in stock. Installation will take about 6 hours with a qualified electrician and a 2-person crew. I've already drafted the work order and safety protocols. It's on your desk." She started to walk past me, then paused. "For what it's worth," she said quietly, "I wasn't trying to embarrass anyone yesterday. I was trying to do my job. Maybe that's the same thing here." Then she was gone, walking back toward the office building with her equipment bag over her shoulder. The crew slowly dispersed, muttering among themselves. I caught fragments. "The hell did that? Maybe we should listen. Patterson's gonna have to eat some crow." Tommy stayed, looking at me with something between amusement and pity. "Well," he said, "that happened." "Yeah. You gonna apologize?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "You humiliated her in front of everybody, boss, and she just proved you wrong in front of everybody. You know what the crew's thinking right now?" I did know. They were thinking that I'd dismissed her because she was young, because she was a woman, because she had a degree instead of calluses. They were thinking that I'd been threatened by someone who actually knew what they were talking about. They were thinking I was exactly the kind of dinosaur that makes good people leave this industry. They were probably right. "I'll handle it," I said. Tommy just shook his head and walked away. I spent the next hour in my office, staring at Sarah's work order. It was perfect. Detailed safety protocols, step-by-step installation procedures, material lists, time estimates. The work of someone who'd actually thought things through instead of just throwing money at a problem and hoping it went away. Munson Hydraulics would have charged us $47,000. I knew because I'd requested the quote. And they would have spent 3 days tracing the hydraulic system before finally checking the electrical, if they checked it at all. Sarah had solved it in less than a week, using equipment we already owned for the cost of exactly $0. I picked up the phone 3 times to call her into my office, put it down 3 times. What the hell was I supposed to say? Sorry I treated you like an incompetent child. Sorry I assumed you didn't know what you were talking about because you didn't fit my mental image of what competent looked like. My phone buzzed. Text from my daughter Emma. Got the money, thanks, Dad. You doing okay? I stared at it for a long time. She asked that a lot lately. Emma was smart, too smart sometimes. She'd figured out a long time ago that I wasn't actually okay, that I'd been not okay since her mother left, maybe since before that. Since my own father's accident, probably. Since I learned that the world was fundamentally unfair, and the only way to survive was to be harder than it was. Except Sarah Martinez wasn't hard. She was precise, professional, competent. And I'd broken something in her yesterday, something I recognized because I'd felt it break in myself years ago. The moment when you realize that doing good work isn't enough, that there are people who will never see you as anything but what they've already decided you are. I texted Emma back, "I'm fine, honey, love you." Then I stood up, walked out of my office, and went to find Sarah Martinez. She was in the small office she shared with 3 other engineers, working on something that involved a lot of calculations and a very large blueprint. She didn't look up when I knocked on the doorframe. "Got a minute?" I asked. "Do I have a choice?" "Fair enough. Look," I started, then stopped. This was harder than I thought it would be. "About yesterday, about the meeting. You were protecting your team," she said, still not looking up. "I get it. New person comes in, challenges the established wisdom, makes people uncomfortable. You did what managers do. That doesn't make it right." Now she did look up and her eyes were tired. "No, it doesn't. But it makes it normal. I've been in this industry for 6 years, Mr. Patterson. This wasn't my first time being dismissed in a meeting. Won't be my last. 6 years. I thought... You thought I was fresh out of college. I know. Everyone does." She set down her pencil. "I graduated at 22. Worked in mining equipment in Nevada for 3 years, then heavy machinery in Texas for 2 years. Applied for 47 positions before Bridgeport hired me. You want to know why 46 companies passed? I have a convenient filing cabinet full of rejection letters. Half of them don't even bother with real reasons anymore. Just not the right fit." The words landed like punches. I'd assumed. I'd looked at her and made a story in my head and never questioned it. "The crane," I said. "That was... I was wrong. You were right. I should have listened. Yes, you should have. No heat in it, just fact. The crew saw what happened today. They're talking, positively, I mean, about you." Something flickered across her face. Hope, maybe, or just exhaustion. "That's good," she said, "because I'm pretty sure I burned every bridge I had here yesterday." "No," I said, "I did that, and I'm going to fix it." She studied me for a long moment, and I had the uncomfortable feeling of being thoroughly assessed and found lacking. "Why?" she finally asked. "Why does it matter to you now?" "Because I saw my daughter in you. Because I saw every person I ever dismissed without really seeing. Because I'm tired of being the kind of man my father would have been ashamed of. Because it's the right thing to do," I said instead. Sarah Martinez looked at me like she could see straight through the weak excuse to the messy truth underneath. Then she nodded once. "Okay," she said. "Let's see if you mean it." The transformer replacement happened on a Tuesday. Sarah supervised, while Tommy Brennan and two electricians did the actual installation. I watched from a distance, saw how she explained things without condescension, how she double-checked safety protocols without being overbearing, how the crew gradually stopped treating her like an outsider and started treating her like someone who knew what she was doing. Because she did know, that was the thing. It was so obvious now that I'd stopped actively avoiding seeing it. But knowing I'd been wrong and fixing what I'd broken turned out to be two very different things. The morning after the transformer replacement, I called an all-hands meeting. 63 people crammed into the break room that smelled like burnt coffee and sawdust. Sarah stood near the back, arms crossed, face carefully neutral. "I want to address something," I started. "Last week, in the project meeting, I shut down Sarah Martinez's presentation on the crane issue. I implied she didn't know what she was talking about. I was wrong. She identified the exact problem, solved it using existing resources, and saved this site roughly $47,000, plus at least 2 weeks of downtime." I looked directly at Sarah. Her expression hadn't changed, but her shoulders had gone rigid. "I apologize, Sarah, to you and to everyone else in that meeting. It was unprofessional and it was unfair." The room was silent. Then someone in the back, I think it was old Pete Kowalski from the welding crew, started clapping. Slowly, others joined in, not everyone. Tommy Brennan looked uncomfortable. Danny Reeves was staring at his boots. But enough people clapped that it felt real. Sarah just nodded once. No smile, no acceptance speech, just acknowledgement. After the meeting, she caught up with me in the hallway. "That was a good start," she said. "A start? Words are easy, Mr. Patterson. What happens next is what matters." She was right, of course. Over the next 2 weeks, I tried. I really did. I gave her back the project coordination responsibilities I'd stripped away. When she presented ideas in meetings, I listened instead of looking for reasons to dismiss them. I defended her when Bobby Chen made a snide comment about diversity hires within earshot. But there was a problem. The more I tried to fix things, the more visible it became how broken they already were. The Bridgeport site had 63 employees, 57 men, 6 women. Of those 6 women, 3 worked in the office doing administrative work. 2 were in HR. Sarah was the only woman in engineering or operations. She was also the only Hispanic engineer, one of only 4 Hispanic employees total. Once I started noticing, I couldn't stop noticing. I noticed that when Sarah walked into the break room, conversation sometimes stopped or changed subjects. I noticed that Danny Reeves still called her sweetheart, even after I told him to knock it off. I noticed that when I assigned her to work with Tommy Brennan on a foundation inspection, Tommy spent the first day explaining basic concepts she'd obviously mastered years ago. I noticed that she kept her office door open and never ever put herself in a situation where she was alone with a male colleague in a confined space. I noticed that she was brilliant and professional and did exceptional work, and that she also carried herself like someone who'd learned to expect ambush. The reckoning came 3 weeks after the crane incident on a Friday afternoon. We'd just finished the monthly safety meeting. Sarah had presented a proposal for upgrading our fall protection systems based on some new OSHA guidelines. It was thorough, well-researched, and would probably save lives. As people filed out, I heard Bobby Chen mutter to someone, "Sure, let's spend 50 grand because the girl read a manual." I should have let it go. I should have pulled Bobby aside later, had a professional conversation, documented it properly. Instead, I spun around. "What did you say?" Bobby had the grace to look startled. "Nothing, boss. Just talking." "No, say it again, loud enough for everyone to hear." The room went quiet. Sarah had stopped at the door, looking back. "I said—" Bobby hesitated, then apparently decided he'd already stepped in it. I said maybe we should think twice before spending $50,000 just because someone with 6 months on site thinks they know better than people who've been doing this for 20 years. You mean Sarah? I mean anyone who... You mean Sarah, I repeated, who has 6 years of experience, not 6 months, who has prevented 2 serious safety incidents in the last month alone, who fixed a problem that had our entire operations team stumped for 3 weeks. That's Sarah. Bobby's face went red. This is about the crane thing again. No, I said, and I could feel something hot and angry rising in my chest. This is about the fact that every time Sarah Martinez opens her mouth, half this crew assumes she's wrong before she even finishes her sentence. This is about the fact that she has to be twice as right just to be taken half as seriously. This is about the fact that I spent 17 years building a team that apparently learned to think exactly like I used to think, and now I'm looking around and realizing what kind of place we've made here. The silence was deafening. That's not fair, Tommy Brennan said quietly. We're good people, boss. Are we? I looked around the room. Pete, remember when Sarah caught that miscalculation on the beam loading specs? The one that would have caused a catastrophic failure. How many of you actually thanked her? Pete shifted uncomfortably. Danny, when was the last time you asked Sarah for her opinion, instead of assuming she wouldn't have one worth hearing? Danny didn't answer. I'm not saying we're monsters. I'm saying we're lazy. We've gotten comfortable with the way things are, and anyone who doesn't fit our idea of what a construction worker looks like has to fight twice as hard just to be seen. Sarah was still standing in the doorway. Her arms were crossed now, and her expression was unreadable. I'm done with that, I said. Sarah's proposal is solid. We're implementing it. And if anyone has a problem with that, they can come talk to me directly instead of muttering in corners like cowards. I walked out. Sarah followed me. We ended up in my office. I expected her to be grateful, or at least pleased. Instead, she looked furious. What the hell was that? She demanded. I was defending you. No, you were making a scene. You were making everything about you and your revelation and your guilt. Her voice was shaking. Do you have any idea what it's like to be me in there now? To have everyone thinking I can't fight my own battles? That I need you to swoop in and save me? You thought you were helping. I know, but you weren't helping me. You were helping yourself feel better about how you treated me. The words hit like a slap. You're right, I said after a long moment. You're absolutely right. I'm sorry. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. You keep apologizing. It's like your default setting now, but apologies don't actually change anything, Mr. Patterson. They just make the person apologizing feel like they've done something meaningful. Then what do you want me to do? I want you to stop making me your redemption project. The words burst out of her loud and raw. I want to just do my job, without every interaction being colored by your guilt trip. I want to not be the symbol of everything you did wrong, or the proof that you've changed, or whatever other narrative you're building in your head. She was breathing hard. We both were. I just want to be a regular engineer, she said more quietly. Making a regular salary, doing regular work. Is that really too much to ask? Before I could answer, my phone rang. I almost ignored it, but the caller ID said, Regional Director Mackenzie. I held up a finger to Sarah. Wait, and answered, Patterson here. Patrick, we have a problem. Mackenzie's voice was tight. The Lakeshore project. The client is threatening to pull the contract. They're saying we're not meeting structural specifications on the support columns. My stomach dropped. The Lakeshore project was our biggest contract, worth $12 million over 18 months. If we lost it, we'd have to lay off at least 15 people. What specifications? We've been following the engineering drawings exactly. They're saying the drawings are wrong, that the load calculations don't account for seismic requirements in the new building codes. Mackenzie paused. They're demanding an independent engineering review before they release the next payment. We're talking about $3.2 million held up, Patrick. If this goes south, the whole site shuts down. I looked at Sarah, who was watching me with a mix of anger and concern. I'll handle it, I told Mackenzie. Give me 24 hours. I hung up. Lakeshore? Sarah asked. You heard? Enough. She was already pulling out her phone, scrolling through something. The support columns. I flagged those 3 weeks ago. Sent you a memo about potential code compliance issues. I felt my face go hot. I don't remember. You were busy. I get it. Her fingers flew across her phone screen. But I did the calculations anyway, just in case the client is right. The original drawings used the 2018 code baseline. The county adopted the 2021 updates last year. The seismic load factors increased by 37% in our zone. Our current columns are under-designed by about 12%. Jesus Christ, it gets worse. We've already installed 43 of the 62 required columns if we have to replace them. She was doing math in her head. Material costs alone would be $800,000, plus labor, plus schedule delays. I sat down heavily. We're finished. Maybe not. Sarah was still scrolling, thinking. The code allows for alternative compliance methods. If we can demonstrate equivalent safety through structural redundancy or supplementary bracing, we might be able to keep the existing columns and just add reinforcement. It would be cheaper, faster, and actually safer than the original design. She looked up at me, but I'd need access to the full structural package, all the drawings, all the engineering stamps, all the client specifications, and I'd need it tonight. You want to fix this. I want to save 63 jobs, she corrected, including mine. Is that a good enough reason? I should have said yes immediately. Instead, I hesitated, because giving her that level of access, that level of responsibility on our biggest project, that was trust, real trust. Not the performative kind where I nodded along to her ideas while secretly preparing backup plans. Sarah saw the hesitation. Something closed off in her face. Never mind, she said. I'm sure you have someone more qualified. No. The word came out harder than I intended. No, I don't. You're the most qualified engineer on this site, and we both know it. I hesitated because I'm still learning to trust you the way you deserve to be trusted, and that's my failure, not yours. I unlocked my computer, pulled up the project files. It's all yours, I said. Tell me what you need. For the first time since the crane incident, Sarah Martinez smiled. It was small, tired, but real. I need coffee, she said. A lot of it. And I need you to not hover while I work. Deal. She was already pulling out her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard before she even sat down. I went to get coffee. It took me 40 minutes because I had to drive to the all-night place 3 miles away. When I got back, Sarah was surrounded by papers, 3 monitors showing different technical drawings, and she was talking on the phone in rapid-fire Spanish with someone who was apparently a code compliance expert in California. She worked until 3 in the morning. I stayed, not hovering, mostly not hovering, making sure she had everything she needed. Watching her work was like watching a surgeon. Precise, methodical, completely focused. At 3:17 a.m., she sat back. Got it. Got what? Alternative compliance pathway. We reinforce the existing columns with steel plate bonding at the critical load points, add supplementary cross-bracing on every 3rd floor, and modify the foundation connection details. Total additional material cost, $94,000. Installation can happen concurrent with existing work, 0 schedule impact. And the final structure will actually exceed code requirements by 15%, instead of falling short by 12%. She turned her laptop so I could see. The calculations filled 6 screens, every number backed up by code references and engineering principles I only half understood. "This is brilliant," I said. "This is my job," she replied. But she was smiling again. That same tired smile. "I'm sending this to the client tomorrow," I said, "with your name on it. This is your work, and you get credit for it." "Okay. And I'm recommending you for a promotion to lead structural engineer." She looked at me sharply. "Why?" "Because you've earned it. Because you're better at this than anyone else on the team. Because if I don't promote you, you'll leave. And I'll spend the next year trying to replace someone irreplaceable. That's not a good enough reason." "What would be?" She thought for a long moment. "Promote me because I'm the best person for the job. Not to make up for how you treated me. Not because you feel guilty. Because when you look at my work objectively, without all the other noise, I'm simply the best choice." "You are," I said. "You absolutely are." Sarah gathered her papers, saved her files, and stood up. She looked exhausted and satisfied in equal measure. "I'm going home," she said, "to sleep for about 4 hours, then come back and finish the implementation drawings. Take the day off. You've earned it." "Can't. We're on a deadline." She paused at the door. "Mr. Patterson?" "Yeah? Thank you for letting me do this, for trusting me with it. Thank you," I said, "for fixing my mistakes again." She left. I sat in my office for another hour, looking at her calculations, her notes, the elegant solution she'd created to a problem I didn't even know we had until it was almost too late. Then I went home and slept like someone who'd just been given a second chance they didn't deserve, but were going to try like hell to earn. The Lakeshore client accepted Sarah's proposal. Not just accepted, praised it. The project manager called it innovative structural engineering and asked if Sarah would be available for consultation on future builds. Mackenzie called me personally to say that Sarah's work had probably saved the site and asked why the hell she wasn't already in a senior position. I promoted her 2 weeks later, lead structural engineer with a 32% pay increase and her own team of 3 junior engineers. She accepted professionally, shook my hand, and got back to work like it was just another Tuesday. But something had shifted, not just with Sarah, but across the whole site. Bobby Chen asked her opinion on a foundation issue, voluntarily. Danny Reeves stopped calling her sweetheart and started calling her by name, or more often, boss, since she was now technically his superior. Tommy Brennan brought his daughter to Career Day and introduced her to Sarah as the smartest engineer I've ever worked with. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments, still jokes that didn't quite land right, still assumptions that had to be actively fought against, but there was movement, progress, the slow, grinding work of changing a culture that had been set in stone for decades. I changed too, though probably not enough. I caught myself making assumptions, had to actively stop and question them. I found myself in meetings noticing who talked and who didn't, who got interrupted and who got listened to. Small things that I'd never seen before because I'd never had to see them. 3 months after the Lakeshore crisis, Emma came home for Christmas break. We sat in my apartment. I'd upgraded to a 2-bedroom, bought some actual furniture that didn't come from a discount warehouse, and I told her about Sarah, about the crane, about everything. "So you were a complete asshole," Emma said. "Realized it, and now you're trying not to be a complete asshole?" Yes, essentially." She grinned. "Good. Personal growth looks good on you, Dad." "I'm sorry," I said, "for all the times I was that person with you, when you wanted to talk about college, about your major, and I kept pushing you toward something practical." Emma had wanted to study environmental science. I'd pushed hard for business administration. We'd compromised on civil engineering, which she'd hated for 2 years, before finally switching to what she actually loved. "You were scared," she said. "You wanted me to be safe, to have job security. I get it now. Doesn't mean it didn't hurt. I know. But you're learning. That counts for something." She paused. "You should introduce me to Sarah. She sounds amazing." I did introduce them. A week later, when Sarah stopped by the office on a Saturday to grab some files, Emma and Sarah talked for 40 minutes about engineering education, about being women in male-dominated spaces, about the specific kind of exhausting it was to be constantly underestimated. I mostly stayed quiet and listened. After Emma left, Sarah looked at me with something that might have been respect. "You raised a good kid," she said. "Her mother deserves most of the credit," I admitted. "I was too busy working to be around much. But you're here now. That matters." We stood there in the empty office, and I realized that somewhere along the way, Sarah and I had become something like friends, not close friends. There was too much history, too much hurt that had left permanent marks. But friends nonetheless. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Sure." "Why did you stay? After everything, after the meeting, after I humiliated you, you could have quit, gone somewhere that would have appreciated you from day one." Sarah was quiet for a moment, looking out the window at the site. The crane, the one she'd fixed, was moving smoothly against the winter sky, lifting steel beams like they weighed nothing. "I thought about it," she finally said. "Every day for about 3 weeks I thought about it. But here's the thing. Every place has people like you. People who make assumptions, who have to be proven wrong before they can see straight. And I was tired of running from that, tired of starting over every time it got hard." She turned back to me. "And also, somewhere underneath all the defensive posturing and the mansplaining, I saw someone who actually could change. Not everyone can. Some people, you show them they're wrong and they just double down, get meaner, make it your fault. But you actually listened eventually. That's rare. I should have listened from the beginning." "Yeah, you should have. But the fact that you can admit that means something." She grabbed her files. "Besides, I really like the work here. Good projects, interesting challenges. I'd rather fight to make this place better than leave and watch it stay the same." After she left, I sat at my desk for a long time thinking about that, about the difference between running from problems and staying to fix them, about the courage it took to keep showing up every day to a place that had hurt you, because you believed it could be better. Spring came, and with it, new projects. The Lakeshore building was completed on schedule and under budget. Sarah's reinforcement design became a talking point in the regional engineering community. She was invited to present at a conference in Denver about innovative structural solutions. I went back to doing my job, but differently now. I listened more, assumed less. When we hired new people, I made sure the interview panels were diverse. When someone raised a concern, I checked my first instinct to dismiss it and actually investigated. It wasn't dramatic. There was no movie moment where everything suddenly became perfect. It was just work, the daily grinding work of being better than I used to be. One afternoon in April, I found Sarah in the yard inspecting a delivery of steel beams. The sun was out, the lake wind had finally lost its winter bite, and she looked tired but content. "Got a minute?" I asked. "Sure. I wanted to show you something." I pulled out a photo on my phone. It was from the crane taken that morning. Someone had put a sticker on the control panel, "Fixed by S. Martinez, OCT 2025. "Who did that?" she asked. "Tommy. He said it was important to remember who solved the problem." Sarah smiled. It was the kind of smile that reached her eyes, transformed her whole face. "That's nice," she said quietly. "I also wanted to tell you that Regional is opening a new site in Wisconsin. They want someone to lead the engineering team. They asked if I had any recommendations." Her smile faded slightly. "You're recommending me?" "I told them you were overqualified for the position, but that they'd be idiots not to ask." I paused. "It would be a significant step up. Your own site. Full autonomy, double your current salary. You should consider it. Do you want me to take it?" It was a fair question. The selfish answer was no. Sarah made my site better, made me better. Losing her would hurt. "I want you to do whatever's best for you," I said. "If that's taking this opportunity, I'll write you the best recommendation letter you've ever seen. If that's staying here, we're lucky to have you. Either way, you've earned the choice." She looked at me for a long moment, and I couldn't quite read her expression. "I'll think about it," she finally said. 2 weeks later, Sarah came into my office and closed the door. "I'm staying," she said. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. The Wisconsin site is interesting, but it's also starting from scratch. Building a new team, establishing processes, dealing with all the politics of a new operation." She sat down. "Here, I have a good team. I have projects I care about. And I have a boss who, despite being occasionally infuriating, actually listens when I talk." "Occasionally? Don't push it." We both laughed. "There's one condition," she said. "Name it. I want to start a mentorship program for young engineers, especially women and minorities who are trying to break into the industry. I want Bridgeport to be the kind of place where people like me don't have to spend 6 years getting rejected before someone gives them a chance. I didn't even hesitate. Done. Whatever you need. Budget, time, resources. Make it happen." Sarah's face lit up with genuine excitement. It was the first time I'd seen her look completely unguarded, and it made me realize how much armor she usually wore. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you for giving this place, for giving me a second chance." She stood up, headed for the door, then paused. "Mr. Patterson." "Yeah? You know you can call me Sarah, right? We've been working together for almost a year now." "Old habits," I said, "but I'll try." "Sarah." She smiled. "Progress." After she left, I sat at my desk and thought about all the ways my life had changed in the past year. I was talking to my daughter again, really talking, about things that mattered. I'd started seeing a therapist to work through some of the anger I'd been carrying since my father's accident. I'd made friends outside of work for the first time in years. But the biggest change was this. I'd learned to see people, not as categories or assumptions or threats to my authority, but as individuals complex and complete, deserving of respect until they proved otherwise. Not the other way around. It seemed like such a simple thing. But for me, it had required breaking apart everything I thought I knew and rebuilding from the foundation up. 3 months later, Sarah's mentorship program accepted its first cohort of 6 young engineers. I watched her work with them in the conference room, patient and demanding in equal measure. And I saw pieces of myself in how she taught, the good pieces, the ones that came from actually caring about the work and the people doing it. The crane still hummed smoothly every day, a constant reminder of the day I learned to listen. And sometimes, late at night when the site was quiet, I'd walk past it and read that sticker, "Fixed by S. Martinez, Oct. 2025. Such a small thing. A woman fixing a crane. Except it wasn't small at all. It was everything. It was the moment one life changed another, and in doing so, changed everything else. I'd humiliated her at work. She'd fixed the crane we called broken. But really, we'd fixed each other. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough to build something better on the foundation that remained. And that, I'd learned, was all any of us could really do. The Wisconsin winter hit hard that January, the kind of cold that made your lungs ache and turned Lake Michigan into a field of jagged ice. I stood in the parking lot at 6:45 a.m., watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and orange that seemed impossibly delicate against the brutal temperature. My breath came out in clouds. 18 months had passed since Sarah Martinez fixed the crane. 18 months since I'd humiliated her in that conference room. The memory still made me wince, but differently now, less like an open wound, more like an old scar that reminded me where I'd been and how far I'd traveled. The site had changed. Not in obvious ways. We still fabricated steel, still ran the same equipment, still dealt with the same deadlines and pressures. But underneath, in the culture and rhythm of the place, everything was different. Sarah's mentorship program had grown from 6 participants to 23. Young engineers from across the region applied to work at Bridgeport specifically because of it. We'd hired 4 of the original mentees as full-time staff. 3 were women. 2 were minorities. All were exceptional. More importantly, they stayed. Our turnover rate had dropped from 37% to 11% in a single year. Mackenzie had called it unprecedented and asked me to present our approach at the regional management conference. I told him Sarah should present it. She'd built it, after all. The front entrance opened, and Tommy Brennan emerged, coffee cup in hand, moving carefully on the icy pavement. "Morning, boss," he called out. "You're here early." "Big day," I said. "The Milwaukee project kicks off." "Right, Sarah's project." He grinned. "Our Sarah running a $12 million build. Who would have thought?" I would have bristled at that 18 months ago. Heard the implication that it was surprising a woman could handle such responsibility. Now, I just heard pride. Tommy had changed too. His daughter was studying engineering at Northwestern now, and he talked about her the way I should have talked about Emma all those years. I was too busy being afraid. "She earned it," I said simply. Inside, the office was already humming. The morning shift had started early to accommodate the Milwaukee project launch. I could hear voices from the conference room, Sarah's calm, measured tones explaining something technical, then laughter from her team. I poured coffee and headed to my office. But before I got there, Danny Reeves intercepted me. "Got a minute?" he asked. Danny had taken Sarah's promotion hard at first. He'd been at Bridgeport for 12 years, had expected the lead engineer position himself. For a few weeks after the announcement, he'd been sullen and uncommunicative. Then something had shifted. "Sure," I said. "What's up?" We went to my office. Danny sat down, looking uncomfortable, in a way that had nothing to do with the chairs. "I wanted to talk to you about something," he started. "Something I probably should have said a long time ago." I waited. When Sarah first got here, I wasn't good to her. I undermined her in meetings. I made jokes. I called her sweetheart even after you told me to stop, just did it when you weren't around. He looked down at his hands. I was threatened, simple as that. She was smart, had credentials I didn't have, and I felt like she was going to show me up, make me irrelevant. "Danny, let me finish." He took a breath. "I was wrong about all of it. She's not just better at the technical stuff than I am. She's better at leading people, better at listening, better at making the team work together, and watching her these past months, learning from her. I've become a better engineer, a better person. Honestly," he looked up at me directly, "I apologized to her 3 months ago, told her everything I just told you. She was gracious about it, more than I deserved. But I wanted you to know too, because you changed something here, boss. When you stood up in that meeting and called us out on our bullshit, when you promoted her even though half the crew thought you were crazy. You gave people permission to be better. I'm trying to take that permission. Thought you should know." I felt something tighten in my chest. "That means a lot, Danny. Thank you for telling me." "One more thing," he said. "My nephew Marcus, he's graduating this year with a degree in structural engineering. He's black, which, well, you know how it is. He's been getting the same runaround Sarah got. Lots of not the right fit letters. I was wondering if we could bring him in for an interview." "Absolutely," I said without hesitation. "Have him send his resume to HR and to Sarah. She handles the technical hiring now." Danny smiled. "That's what I figured. Thanks, boss." After he left, I sat for a moment, processing. These small moments, Danny's apology, his nephew, the fact that he naturally referred candidates to Sarah now, these were the real measures of change. Not the big dramatic gestures, but the daily accumulation of people choosing to be better than they were yesterday. The Milwaukee project launch meeting started at 8. The conference room was packed. Sarah's team, the client representatives, structural engineers from the Milwaukee site, and various stakeholders. I sat in the back, observing. Sarah stood at the front, completely in command. She'd cut her hair shorter, wore steel-toed boots that showed months of wear, and carried herself with a confidence that seemed both hard-earned and natural. She was 30 now, and she looked like someone who'd fought for every inch of respect she'd gained. The Milwaukee Convention Center presents unique structural challenges, she was saying, pointing to a 3D model on the screen. We're dealing with a 40,000 square foot column-free exhibition space, which means we need transfer trusses that can handle distributed loads of up to 1,200 kips while maintaining deflection ratios within L480. She walked through the technical details with the kind of clarity that made complex engineering seem almost simple. The client representatives were nodding, asking intelligent questions, treating her with the automatic respect that should have been there from day one, but so often wasn't. I caught myself feeling proud, then checked that impulse. Sarah's success wasn't about me. It wasn't my achievement. If anything, I'd nearly prevented it from happening. During the break, I stepped outside to take a call from Emma. She was finishing her master's degree in environmental science, working on research about wetland restoration in the Great Lakes region. "How's the big project launch?" she asked. "Good. Sarah's running it like a symphony conductor." "You sound surprised." "No, just impressed, as always." Emma laughed. "You know, Dad, I was thinking about coming home next month, doing some field research in the area. Maybe you could introduce me to some of the wetland restoration people. I know Bridgeport had to do mitigation work when you expanded the site." "I'd love that," I said, and meant it. "Your mom's coming too?" "Separately. We're not getting back together, Dad." Her voice was gentle but firm. "But we're both proud of you, of the work you've done on yourself." After we hung up, I stood in the cold for another moment, letting the wind sting my face. Jennifer and I had managed to build something like friendship in the wreckage of our marriage. It wasn't what we'd planned, but it was real and valuable. So much of life, I'd learned, was about accepting that things wouldn't be what you'd imagined, but finding value in what they actually were. Just that afternoon, I found Sarah in the equipment yard, conducting a safety inspection with two of her mentees, a young woman named Keisha Washington and a kid named James Chen, Bobby's nephew who'd transferred from the shipyard to work under Sarah. "The load rating is clearly marked," Sarah was saying, pointing to a placard on a lifting beam. "But you always verify it against the specs in the manual. Always. Because someone might have swapped equipment, or the placard might be from a different beam, and if you lift something too heavy—" "Catastrophic failure," Keisha finished. "People die." "Exactly, this isn't theoretical. Every protocol exists because someone got hurt or killed learning the hard way." Sarah noticed me and nodded. "We're almost done here." I watched them work for a few more minutes. Sarah's teaching style was patient but exacting. She didn't talk down to them, but she also didn't let anything slide. When James made a calculation error, she made him work through it again rather than just giving him the answer. After they left, Sarah and I walked back toward the offices together. "The Milwaukee project looks good," I said. "It's going to be challenging, but good challenging." She paused. "I wanted to thank you for backing my proposal to bring in Keisha and James as assistant project engineers. I know it's unusual to give people that much responsibility so early." "You were running projects after 6 months here," I pointed out. "Granted, I was fighting you every step of the way, but still." She smiled slightly. "That's different. I had to fight for it. I want them to have it offered freely, to know from day one that their competence is assumed, not something they have to constantly prove." We walked in silence for a moment. The afternoon sun was already low on the horizon, the shadows long and blue across the snow. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said. "And I want an honest answer." "Okay." Patrick admits he sometimes resents the effort of unlearning his assumptions, though he knows the burden Sarah carries every day is far heavier. He apologizes for past harm and for resenting the work of change she never had the option to avoid. Sarah acknowledges his sincerity, emphasizing that what matters is not performative change, but consistent, everyday actions, and that he has truly changed. Later, the team gathers at a bar to celebrate the project and the team's growth. Watching Sarah relaxed and accepted, they reflect on their initial resistance, recognize their blind spots, and admit they might have lost her without the incident that forced change. The night ends with a shared sense that the team has genuinely evolved, raising a toast to growth and to Sarah's patience and leadership. I left McCarthy's around 10 and drove home through empty streets, the city quiet under a clear winter sky. My apartment, the better one, the one that actually felt like a home, was warm when I arrived. I'd hung some pictures on the walls: Emma's graduation photo, a shot of the Bridgeport crew at last year's company picnic, and, in a frame on my desk, a photo of the crane with that sticker. Fixed by S. Martinez, Oct 2025. I made tea, sat at my kitchen table, and opened my laptop. I had an email from Mackenzie about the regional management conference. My presentation on culture change was scheduled for March. He'd attached the preliminary agenda, and I saw that Sarah was presenting too, on technical innovation and team leadership. We'd both be on that stage. The person who'd nearly destroyed someone's career and the person who'd survived it, speaking about what we'd learned. I started drafting my presentation notes, not about the policies we'd changed or the programs we'd implemented. Those were important, but they weren't the heart of it. The heart was simpler and harder, learning to see people, learning to question your own assumptions, learning to value competence wherever it came from, not just in the forms you expected, learning that saying "I was wrong" wasn't weakness, it was the beginning of wisdom. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Forgot to mention, Munson Hydraulics called today. They want to know if we'd consult on a crane issue they can't solve." I may have laughed out loud. I texted back, "You earned that laugh." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, we both did. "See you tomorrow, boss." I set the phone down and looked out the window at the Chicago skyline, lights twinkling in the distance. Somewhere out there, Sarah was probably still working, refining her Milwaukee project plans, or reviewing mentee progress, or planning the next innovation that would make us all better. And tomorrow, I'd show up and try to be worthy of working alongside her. Not by making grand gestures or offering dramatic apologies, just by listening, by questioning my assumptions, by making space for voices that didn't sound like mine, by doing the daily, unglamorous work of being better than I was yesterday. The crane was still running smoothly, 18 months after Sarah fixed it. But the real thing she'd fixed, the real thing we'd fixed together, was harder to see and more important than any machine. She'd fixed the culture. I'd fixed myself. We'd fixed the possibility of this place being somewhere people actually wanted to work, wanted to grow, wanted to build careers and lives. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. There would be setbacks and mistakes and moments when old patterns reasserted themselves, but there would also be progress. Hard-won, incremental, genuine progress. And that, I'd learned, was more than enough. It was everything.